All right. So, welcome back to Self Invested.
What is that?
Yeah. Welcome back to Self Invested, where we talk about how you can do better with money. In this video, I sit down with Deepa and my 2-year-old daughter because she refuses to take her nap while we have our chat. And we talk about Deepa's shared ownership experience. Now, I first came across Deepa after she was featured in the BBC Panorama episode, The Home I Can't Afford, which was a short documentary about the financial difficulties people were experiencing because of the shared ownership scheme. Now, I've decided to split the video up into two because we had quite a long conversation. And the first video is going to be focused on staircasing and the increase in cost of service charge. And the second video, which I release tomorrow, is going to be about the building safety crisis, which is an issue that has meant that Deepa and her family can't leave their home. They can't sell their home, they can't rent it out, and they're forced to stay in their home until this crisis is resolved. Now, if you want to find out more information about the building safety crisis, or you want to support efforts to end it, then I'll provide some useful links down in the description to this video. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Say see you soon. See you soon. So the first thing I was going to ask you about was what attracted you to shared ownership?
That's a very interesting question. I had no idea about shared ownership before I looked at these properties. I wasn't even aware of any of these schemes. I'd heard of something like Help to Buy, but I hadn't heard of shared ownership. So what had happened was I had gone to there was a conference. I believe it was an exhibition, so a home ownership exhibition. And it was the point at which I'd started looking for my own property. Then speaking to a few of the stands and exhibitors, I realized that, a lot of the properties are going to be out of my reach, and there are certain schemes that can help you. Peabody were one of the exhibitors there, so I registered with them and also registered on another website. I can't remember what the name is, sorry, but it was a website that told you about any new homes that were up and, would be available soon. Following that, I didn't do a lot of research into it until I had found a property that I was actually interested in. So I looked at a few properties, within London, outside of London, just basically seeing what I could afford. And turned out that there was one right here, just down the road from where I was working, which would have been ideal, convenient, and I then applied for it. So I got myself on the register to reserve a place. That's when I started looking into shared ownership and what it actually means. And at the time, the marketing is very good. It's very glossy and very appealing, where you can buy a little bit of the property, you can rent the rest of the property, and when you're ready, you can purchase the whole lot. And it seems so simple on paper. In practice, it's very different. But for being able to have a property in central London that was brand new, that was really appealing. And when you do go to see the show homes, you get sucked in by shiny, glossy, new. It's and the thought of being able to have that as your first property, it's very, very attractive.
So what did you end up buying? What did you end up getting a share of?
I bought this property here is a 2-bedroom flat. It's in Southwark. I bought a 75% share. I had to buy a 75% share because the policy is that you've got to buy the max that you can afford. And at the time, I was able to afford that much.
And starting at sort of 75%, which is the maximum share you can buy at the start with shared ownership, you would think that you would be in a good position to staircase to 100% because it's only 25% remaining. But that wasn't the case, was it? Like, what happened? Because I'm guessing that was your plan. It was the staircase to 100%.
So it was within the first year I had inquired about staircasing and was told, I'm sorry, it's too soon. You can't do it. And that took me aback. And I thought, that doesn't seem right. I read my lease and it did say you can buy at any point. But there were conflicting conflicting documents. So my lease said that I could, but the website, the housing association's website said that you couldn't. And so the policies, because they conflicted, I just thought, okay, best to just leave it right now and wait. So what I did instead was I started overpaying on my mortgage, and I, put in as much as I possibly could. When I had the valuation done, and this was just 4 years after I had bought, probably not even that, sorry, 3 years. It's just under 4 years. But at that point, the price had increased considerably. So when I looked at it, I needed to have an extra mortgage of another it was about £73,000. And I thought to myself, even on my current salary, even with an increase in my salary, even with any of my overpayments, I could not afford it. And if you're looking at, trying to get a mortgage for that extra amount, and you're looking at the 3 times multiplier, what I needed to do was, between the point I had initially purchased and the point I was looking at staircasing, I needed an increase of 25k in my salary. So over 3 years, that's virtually impossible unless you are really speeding through your career. It became very clear to me very quickly that I wasn't going to be able to buy that portion. So ended up just letting that process go and thinking, hopefully I'll be able to do it at a later date. Perhaps if I have some, if I save money and I can just buy it with cash. It's still not happened, and I'm now 11 years and I'm still here.
And I'm guessing the property is even more expensive than it was after 4 years. More expensive, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I had it valued in 2013, it was valued at 290,000.
290,000. And what was the value? When did you buy the property, and what was the value when you bought it?
When I bought in 2010, it was valued at 200. So it had increased by 90,000, which is a huge amount.
And I feel like we're about to enter a similar period to when you bought your place in 2010. I can see, once the furlough scheme passes and stamp duty holiday ends,
Yeah.
prices do fall, and maybe 2023. I don't know when the market's recovering again after sort of next year. It's probably going to be similar to when you bought. So anyone that ends up in anyone that ends up in shared ownership, sort of in the next couple of years, you're saying hello. They're likely to be buying at the bottom of the market when things are starting to head back upwards. So they're going to buy when it's quite affordable, and we'll probably see their home rise in value quite quickly in the following years. So I can see that happening.
So initially it will be seen as a really good investment, but if you aren't staircasing as soon as possible, you will very quickly be priced out of being able to do that ever.
And
I really liked your video about why you will never be able to staircase to 100%, because it's very clear how it works practically. And if somebody had told me that at the very beginning, I wouldn't have done this. I would have just looked for a property that I could have afforded outright. Be it, okay, I would have lost the fact that I'm not going to be centrally located, but I would have my own place. I wouldn't be subject to housing association restrictions, and I probably wouldn't be stuck in a lease that at the end of it, I don't even own my property. And that's the scariest thing, is that you wouldn't even own the land or the property, the building, nothing. You end up with nothing.
I think that video that you is a good illustration of why it's unlikely most people will staircase 100%, because essentially what I said in the video was, as we mentioned at the start, when you buy that property, they maximize your affordability. So if the maximum you could buy based on your salary was 50%, then all you can buy is 50%. Even if the property doesn't increase in value, which is likely to, if you want to staircase to 100%, or you need to staircase, to even 75%, you need your salary to increase by that same proportion. So if you want to staircase to 100% from owning 50%, it's likely, even if the property's value doesn't change, you're going to need your salary to double. And
Yes.
you paying down your mortgage, that's only going to make a small dent in the amount that you need to pay to actually staircase 100%. And it doesn't get explained to people like that. It's, as you said, like they give you a very glossy image of the scheme from the outset. So you think, all right, you're getting a share of your home, and in the future you can staircase up to 100%. But yeah, in reality, it's not that simple.
It's not at all. And you're right that this, I mean, the video that you made, that sort of information was not available to me in 2010. But it's incredibly useful to know. It doesn't matter at what point you buy, whether even if the market is at a very, very low point, it doesn't matter at what point you buy, you still need to know that information, that it's very difficult to staircase. And if you look at the stats, there's probably less than 2% who are staircasing to 100%. And even within that, you've got potentially people are staircasing to 100% as a process of selling. So it's not a real transaction in my eyes. It's a pretend transaction to get to the selling point.
Yeah. So that's basically where people are selling to somebody that's buying the property outright.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really hope that somebody's able to get some data on how many people actually have been able to staircase to 100% while continue living there, just to give people a true picture of, you know, how many people out of, you know, the large numbers that they talk about are actually able to staircase to 100% and live in that home rather than sell it. Because I didn't even think of that situation, and that's probably, I could imagine they use those figures in the total figures they talk about when they talk about everyone that's staircase to 100%. I can imagine a large portion of that is just people selling their property. Are you having fun?
Yes. Yes. It's actually something I'm looking into. I'm working with some people to try and get this information.
Do keep me up to date with that, because I think that's very useful information. I think that's information that, you know, a prospective shared owner should have before they make their decision. That's something that should be publicly available. It's in the public interest.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely.
As well, like this is the next sort of thing I wanted to touch on, but it's the other costs as well, because I mean, although you're able to buy a smaller share, you're still responsible for 100% of the service charge, even if you own 10% of your property. And if there are any sort of, you know, damages or any sort of works that need to be done to the building, you're still responsible for 100% of your flat share towards those um, works that are required. And I know
Yes.
from the BBC Panorama episode, you talked about how your costs had increased from sort of 2010 to now, and I think that's something that people don't realize. They think the amount that they quoted at the start, how much their rent and their service charge are going to cost, is probably going to be the same thing sort of in the future. But in reality, all of your costs get more expensive.
Yes.
And yeah, it'll be good if you could just sort of explain or just give the numbers of how these things have changed over time.
Okay, so within the first year, I was charged, it was around £1,800, and that's an annual cost. I had moved in partway through the year, so I paid less than that. So, you know, on a yearly basis, it was £1,800, and that was just the service charge. The rental portion of that, I think, was about £1,300. When the second year came around, the cost stayed around about the same, but it was within the third year things started to increase. So my service charge went up by approximately £500. I was upset about it, but at the time I thought, okay, well, you know, it's £500 over 12 months. It's not so bad, and there probably are some things that you need to add in. But every single year from that point, the picture started getting worse because we got less of a service, and the cost still went up. So the following year, it went up by about £200. Then it went up by another, I think it was £500. And by 2017, this had shot up to £3,300 just for service charge.
Wow.
It was It was an incredible amount, but because it creeps up year on year, you don't notice it until you look back at the history. And it was when I started looking at that that I had to question, well, what's going on here? This is not increasing with, say, the price of inflation. This is just extra costs. And for many of the costs involved, you think we're still within our 10-year NHBC guarantee, so we shouldn't have that much of an increase. And one of the things that really bothers me is when you look at the marketing, you just see people who are within their first 2 years who are happy and, you know, they think they're in a great place, but they don't show you 4 or 5 years after that. They don't show you those who are still there 10 years later and cannot move on. They don't show you those pictures. Those case studies are actually invaluable to me. The more and more people I speak to, the more I realize that shared owners are trapped where they are unless they're able to sell and just move on.